from the All Indiana Podcast Network.
It's time for real conversation about the real issues that affect our communities.
Poverty, education, equality, and more.
This is Real Talk.
Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Welcome to Real Talk on the All Indiana Podcast Network. I am Reverend Charles Harrison, and on this episode today, I will be talking to my good friend Eunice Trotter, who is formerly the owner and the editor and publisher of the Indianapolis Recorder, and she also served for years as the editor at the state's largest newspaper, the Indianapolis Star, and she is also an author. Stay tuned as I talk with Eunice Trotter about the issues that are facing this city in Indianapolis, and particularly in the Black community. Welcome back to Real Talk, and this is Reverend Harrison, and I am just excited and enthused today that I have a good friend, Eunice Trotter, that is here to have a conversation with me, and we have a lot of conversations on the phone and in person about Indianapolis, the Black community, and many of the challenges that we face in the community. And welcome, Eunice.
Hello. Thank you for having me here.
Well, thank you so much for being here today on Real Talk. And let's kind of get into it because, I really didn't fully understand the politics of Indianapolis. And, for years I have been working with the Indianapolis 10-Point Coalition and trying to address the issue of violence. But I did not know the dynamics of the city. I did not know the politics of the city and how what I thought was my effort to try to do something good and really try to curb the pattern of violence became so political. And I know you've been around here a long time. Kind of talk to me about Indianapolis, the Black community, the politics of it.
Well, I'd like to give you a historical context.
Okay.
Indianapolis has a very old Black population in terms of when Black people moved here, how they came to become empowered here, and so forth. As you know, most of the population of Indiana started in the southern part of the state, like in Knox County and Jeffersonville area, all that lower southern part of the state. And over time, because of various reasons, race being one of them, job opportunity being another, there was a population movement north. So that brought people from actually one culture, which was sort of a southern orientation, to the north. Once we hit Indianapolis, we began to form, alliances and support groups and organizations through churches and so forth. Then in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, there was a migration of Black people from other parts of the country, including the South, but North Carolina, Virginia, Mississippi, Alabama, they moved north and they settled here. And that brought a different dynamic. These were people who were not so-called tied into the power structure that existed. And when I say the power structure that existed, of course, it would have been the leadership of the state who tended to favor certain African Americans because they knew them. And these African Americans then received support of the power structure in whatever it was they were doing, be it from running for political office to getting money, to getting mortgages, whatever. There was that support base with these new folks coming in at that same time. Well, those existing people here had established themselves in communities and saw a lot of the new Black people as being threats to this culture. They came in with more country ways, so to speak, Yeah. Some of them, brought their chickens with them. And this was an embarrassment. Many of them were not educated. They couldn't find jobs. They stood around, then became involved in criminal activity just to survive. And they sort of became like an embarrassment to that existing Black educated culture that was already here. Mm. And there you see these blocks and these groups of people separating one from the other and distancing themselves. In the 1920s, when most blacks were Republican in Indianapolis, there was even an effort at that time, according to what I read in history, to remove what was called birds of passage. These were black people who, stood around Indiana Avenue without a job or, came up with various and sometimes criminal activities just to survive. And so there's a schism that formed here between the haves and the have-nots, the people from the South versus those who were already here. And I think that continues to this day in various forms, not maybe as blatant as it was. Now, through the 20s, there was a shift from the Republican Party to the Democrat Party, even though racist groups like the Klan were in control of the Democrat Party at that time. So again, there was this divide and conquer thing with blacks against blacks, some for the Republicans, some for the Democrats. And then on through the 50s, we became more Democrat. So today, most black people are Democrats. So you will still have a group of black people who are not Democrats and have different ideas of how we as a people should go, but still there's that schism. You've got the people, the Democrats who tend to be social oriented in terms of being supportive of those people who don't have. So they're going to support, welfare and, other entitlement programs to help folks versus the Republicans who are the more educated, seemingly, who will support economic kinds of things. They're going to want to, go after bank loans and other economic development resources so that you can pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, so to speak. And so we still have that today. The haves and the have-nots is what it boils down to, Reverend.
So this division has kind of been here since the 1920s based on how people moved into the Indianapolis community, population shifts, that created this kind of division that we see. How has it evolved since the 1920s as you look at where we are today in 2022?
Well, again, all roads lead back to that dollar.
Okay.
It's about that money. And so that group, which has the resources and is able to pass down those resources to others, will have the power. I was mentioning to you earlier today that I remember when there was, an infusion of money to the Democrats to pay people to help support the party and the interests of the Democrat Party at one time, more so than probably today. Now, there's still money flowing,
right.
But the issue becomes, does it filter down to the grassroots level of people? So you built your power base by those resources. That also included jobs. I was mentioning to you that at one time here in Indianapolis, and probably statewide, I know in Gary, you couldn't get a job for the city without going through the political structure. You had to get sign-off by precinct committeemen and ward chair people before you were allowed to work. So that party that was in power could control votes. Mm-hmm. So if you were likely to get a job by supporting a particular candidate, then who do you think you're going to support? Versus another candidate who may be even better for our community, but didn't have the resources.
But I saw the shift when I came to Indianapolis in June of '93. At that time, Mayor, I think Goldsmith was the mayor at the time when I came. So Republicans still had control of all the major offices then. So was that a time where you still had a lot of blacks still connected, involved in the Republican Party at that time when Republicans tended to hold all the major offices in the city? And then it kind of shifted with Bart Peterson after Goldsmith didn't run again. And kind of from there, we did have Ballard for 2 terms, but now Hogsett. So was there a shift once Peterson got elected, because for a time there it seemed like Republicans kind of controlled Marion County?
Well, starting in the 1960s, Republicans had control of Marion County, which was bolstered by the passage of Unigov.
Okay.
And Unigov essentially brought in Republicans from the outlying communities, small towns and suburban areas, which increased the population of Republicans and increased the voting population. Republicans remained in control in Marion County, in the mayor's office and the council for decades. It wasn't until Bart Peterson that a Democrat did come into power. Now, there's all arguments about what the purpose of Unigov was. Some say it was to increase the tax base. Others say it was to, retain power by the Republican Party. Whatever the real reason was for Unigov, the effect was that Democrats had no power within Indianapolis. And so from that period arose these coalitions of people in the minority party. And these people had a majority of the voting blocks within that party. Today, those people, and typically would be African Americans, have a minority of the minority party within the Democrat Party. That makes sense.
Right.
So prior to this time, when the black vote was very important to making any headway at all, there was some voice that was allowed to be given. So during those days, you would find several of the politicians of that time sort of banding together because they had a common interest. They were in the same plight. Over time, that block has been deteriorating so that now you have blocks of black officials and power brokers. This is what we see right now with this whole slating issue. You have a block that is supporting the Democrat Party today, and then you have a block that isn't supporting the Democrat Party today.
What role did media play in this? Because when I came to Indianapolis, certainly at some point there was the emergence of Amos Brown, in the afternoon. I know your role at the Indianapolis Recorder. Did media, help shape the agenda during that time? What role did media play, in dealing with these issues in the black community?
Well, the role of media is to inform,
of
course, and to advocate. It's just not to inform, but also to advocate. When I was in that position at the Recorder, I tended not to be a power broker, so to speak. I was not endorsing candidates through my editorials and that kind of thing. Tried to walk a more neutral line and allow both parties to have access to media for the primary purpose of informing versus persuading. With Amos, Amos would attempt to do the same thing. However, he became more aligned with the Democrat power brokers at that time. Because again, it goes back to dollars. Who is going to advertise and who isn't? And if Republicans don't see the benefit of advertising, say in media, say at WTLC at that time, they're going to be absent in terms of the resources that station would need to survive. So, it's kind of just a no-brainer. You have to put your money where your mouth is. So if you say that you support a people or a thing, then you should do that through the sharing of those resources. So most of the advertising on, say, WTLC at that time would have been from the Democrats who were running for offices, be they black or be they white, period. Now, so in the Recorder during those days, it was pretty much the same because the Republicans didn't see the benefit of spending resources there because they kind of wrote it off that we were going to lose anyway, so why spend our money in areas that are Democrat dominated? Let's put our money where it might count. And so they didn't either. There were some who did, but for the most part, they didn't do that. In terms of shaping public opinion, yes, media had a role in that through the stories that were written, say in the newspaper, in the Recorder, and at that time, the Indiana Herald, that was Democrat controlled, because you know that media has a political leaning. It always has. Media typically is not bipartisan neutral. It will have a leaning. The Recorder historically leaned Republican.
Really?
To the day Marcus Stewart died, yes.
Okay.
Historically, WTLC, through the ownership of Frank Lloyd, who was a Democrat, leaned Democrat. The Indiana Herald, which was operated by Opal Tandy and then later his wife Mary Tandy, leaned Democrat. She was a Democrat precinct committee woman, and I think she may have even been a ward chairwoman at one time. So news and the Star, let's not leave them out, historically leaned Republican. Through the Pulliam family. And that is the case with media, period. You're going to see those leanings. And what does a leaning look like? It looks like, what is the focus of your editorials? What positions are you taking? What kind of stories are you assigning your reporters to cover, and what angle or angles are those stories taking? And it just kind of is what it is. So this is historic that it's been this way.
But it seems to be today, Eunice, I think the Star has a different leaning today.
Because of the ownership.
Okay, so it has to do with the ownership. Yes. It seems to be more progressive, more democratic today.
Of the ownership.
Because of the ownership.
Because of the ownership.
Yep.
And the Star is owned by the Gannett Corporation.
Okay.
Now, the Star was sold from the Pulliam family to Gannett Corporation in the late 90s, or 2000, something like that, 2001. Gannett took control of the Star. And you can see an immediate impact on the content of the paper. It became more, I'll say, neutral in terms of how it handled coverage of issues and the editorials and so forth. And even within the Star, there was a culture conflict there through what positions would be taken for editorials or would not be taken through editorials, what subjects would be covered, what issues would be covered, where the paper would stand on those issues. So you call it progressive that you're seeing now. I call it more a neutral position, because there are conservative and less conservative, more liberal viewpoints that are being expressed in the Star, but still both are there.
Well, and the reason I say that, several years ago, there was an article that was written concerning the Indianapolis 10-Point Coalition, and it took a kind of a different angle to it than what was told to us when we were participating in the story. And it seemed to be an angle that supported the mayor's office and their positions, and the kind of the talk that you heard about 10-Point from the people who were being critical of us. And it kind of took that. It was about, it would be about 4 or 5 years ago, that article was written, because Reverend Ellis was still with us then. And about 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. And it certainly it certainly seemed to try to take a swipe at us in the article and how it was written by younger reporters. And I tend to see the difference in reporting, and not just with the Star, but with some of the other television stations, with the younger reporters compared to some of the more veteran reporters. And many of them have retired and are doing other things in life now. And so that was the reason I raised that. It gets into my whole issue with the woke and the council culture today. It seems like it filters its way sometimes in media.
Well, it depends on who has those reporters and editors' ears.
Okay.
You mentioned the woke and the cancel cultures. In the 90s, into 2001, whenever it was that. I can't remember Bart Peterson's tenure.
2000 to 2008, I think. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, the editor at the Star at that time was Dennis Ryerson. And I know that he was a buddy to Bart Peterson and to the Democrats. That's factual.
I remember.
And so... So you would see more of a tendency to support Democrat leanings. You personally, you were considered aligned with Republicans.
Right.
And without someone at that time, I was there to provide a different perspective about even you at that time.
Right.
Without that different perspective being provided, then those writers are going to go with what and who they know. So you have a younger group of reporters and editors now, people who are not from Indianapolis, don't know the history, background of you, or not just you, but just the history,
right,
period,
right, absolutely.
Of the city, even what names to call streets,
right.
Will tend to go with who's closest to them. Now, when they come into the town, into Indianapolis, they tend to live downtown. And if they don't live downtown, then they're going to live in Hamilton County. They're going to be removed from the core, and therefore the core of the political lives of African Americans in the city, particularly. Many of them don't go to church. So they don't have that, information pipeline. So they have to rely on who they have to rely on, those that they know, and those are going to typically be the establishment people that they come into contact with professionally and socially. That's where they're going to get their information. That's where they're going to, be lobbied. That's where they're going to be favored, even.
Right.
So, you're going to, without a real effort by media who come into cities to get to know the community, know the history of it, then you're going to have sort of milk toast loose reporting and editorializing.
Well, and I think part of what I consider the problem in Indianapolis is there are diversity of voices in the community. We're not a monolithic community. So when people associate Reverend Harrison with Republicans because we work with Republicans on issues that we see as apolitical, but as an issue to, impact the life of our community, it doesn't facilitate a real conversation about how do we best provide solutions to this issue, and hearing all the different voices and find ways that we can find common ground. I think a lot of the issues that Black America is facing, which is no different from Indianapolis, is very complicated. Mm-hmm. Some of them have been around for decades, particularly the whole issue with violence. Going back to when I was a teenager in the 1970s, when you started to see the emergence of urban violence and drugs and gangs and guns that started leading to a disproportionate number of African American males being killed. And certainly it affected my family with my 21-year-old brother. And I think that's the concern. I think the media also plays a role, and sometimes how they report things are because I know it was an issue with them coming to me all the time, you know, and I just wanted to talk about violence. I didn't want to be the spokesperson of the black community, but all the stations and newspapers would come to me about,
they began to know you.
Yes.
So like I said, you're that familiar person. And, you know, it's that kind of superficial reporting that says, oh, let's go get a black opinion here.
Right.
Who are we going to get? Oh, we know Reverend Harrison. Let's go to him for everything, you know.
Yeah.
And that's what happens because they don't know others to go to. And as you know and have experienced, the more that you're out there being the spokesperson, the more you become personally a target for criticism, particularly if you do not take the position of the majority. For example, when you took that position on stop and frisk, it caused, just a volley of criticism to you and allegations that you were a puppet of the Republicans. Now, you know, versus you having a particular opinion about a thing. And that's that cancel culture we mentioned, you know, to dirty your reputation.
Right.
To make you less effective. They stop coming to you.
Yeah. The problem with that was they misconstrued the comment. The comment was that I would rather do stop and frisk than for the black community to do nothing about the record-breaking violence. So people just ran with it. Yes.
Right. But did anyone come to you before they expressed their negative opinion?
Oh, no.
So that's again, like I said, part of that cancel culture. And just the fact that you rub elbows with people like the former deputy governor, lieutenant governor, Pence.
A former governor, Mike Pence.
Yes. Okay. Pence, and because of his positions, so you became, in the eyes of many, allied with him and them, regardless of how you voted or who you voted for or what you supported or did not support. Just the image there, of you walking with him. You know, oh my goodness, you know, he's one of them. Therefore, he is a traitor to us because we know what's best for the black community and we should have all hands on deck for our positions. I'll tell you something really interesting that happened just last summer about that kind of a thing. I'm a member at Scott United Methodist Church. It's my family church at 22nd Andrew J. Brown. And at that church, Reverend Nike has held the Generation to Generation Conference last decade plus. One of the workshops that we wanted to have was to bring together the pastors. Now, still in our culture, the black church is the most powerful institution that we have. Should it be in politics? I don't even want to debate that. The black church has always been in politics.
It's always been in politics,
but should we now?
Yeah.
You know, I don't, you know. So you cannot imagine how difficult it was to get the black pastors to come together.
Oh, I can.
It's because of their political alliances.
Yes.
It's because of their quest to be the spokesperson and their lack of understanding that we need many spokespeople in all walks and areas, are because of their desire to control the questioning of or the conversation around the desire to come together. So what happened? Half of them didn't show up because part of them asked that half not to show up and to remain aligned to their positions, you know, not even knowing what could have been accomplished or what we wanted to accomplish during that particular workshop. And I know that others have tried to do this as well. You know, and I think until we take our personal agendas off the table and look at what's good for the community as a whole, we're going to continue to have these schisms.
That is so true. Eunice, thank you so much for this conversation. This is part one of our conversation. We're going to continue this conversation on our next episode. I would like to thank you for joining us today on Real Talk with Reverend Harrison. And I pray that you have a blessed and an awesome day in the Lord.
Thank you. Thank you. Amen.
I'm Reverend Charles Harrison, and this has been Real Talk. Join me next time as I bring more real talk about real issues that affect our community here in Indianapolis and across the country. This is Reverend Harrison. Have a blessed day.
This is Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast.
And be sure to check out other great podcasts on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Online now at allindianapodcast.com.